Okay, well, I'm very pleased to be able to talk to you today. I think I'm very much at the grassroots level with my presentation here. The previous speakers, everything they're talking about, we have in common here in Ayrshire. The big problem we have is, probably like everybody, is a lack of funding. However, I'll move on to my talk, and I'm just reading off a different screen. We move away from traditional riverbank stabilization using hard engineering approaches towards more eco-sensitive approaches in recent years. I'm sure we're almost all aware of the different range of techniques available, even if we haven't used them ourselves. We've seen them in Roger's presentation there, root wads and trees and willows, swiling. Other techniques are available. All these techniques have their limitations, and there are pitfalls to be aware of, and sometimes the outcome doesn't always meet our expectations. And sometimes we have to go back to try again a few years later. That's not really unsurprising when you consider the unpredictability and the tremendous forces in rivers. The rivers we have in Ayrshire, I can speak from an Ayrshire perspective here, very few of them are natural. Most of the rivers we see here are a result of land use or historic modifications and alterations. And this is what creates the problems that we face and we have to try and address. We have just completed a fairly large a project funded by the Nature Restoration Fund, which was worth, I think we got £22,750 for this project. This takes place in the Upper River Aire catchment. There's plenty of problems here. There's historic straightening, disconnected meanders, intensive grazing, poor buffers, no fencing, silt in the spawning beds as a result of massive erosion. There's very few trees. There's good trees nearby, good habitat nearby, but nothing on the riverbank really. We've got warming water temperatures and very poor connectivity between the river and the riparian landscape, the riparian habitat. Some of the problems we see in the Upper River Aire are beyond our remit, or were beyond our remit for this project. That photo there shows you what is classed as a high water quality. That's the River Aire in low flows. It's a result of upwelling iron-rich groundwater and poor dilution with lack of rainfall or low rainfall levels. The river turns this horrible grey, green, opaque colour. But like I say, that's classed as good water quality. That's a political one, and I'm going to body swerve that just now. We did massive research into this project before we actually came around to finding the funding and delivering it. It took approximately 5 years from the first call from the farmer to where we were at the start of this year, starting out in the project. And we looked into ancient maps, or as old a maps as we could get. We looked at aerial photographs from 1945, and we could see changes happening, and we could see why. We plotted these changes over the decades, and more recently, you could see the alterations that were occurring. Dealing with that, well, we first had to decide, should we deal with it? Should we just allow this to carry on and erode and change and restore itself? But there was fairly compelling reasons why we felt we should at least intervene in some areas, not all. There was no way was it our intention to correct everything here. We need some erosion. We're all aware of that. There had been historic attempts. This photo that you see there shows a hanging fence. And the insert photo there, behind the hanging fence, you can see a row of oak stakes that used to carry oak barge boards. And this was a very old, ancient attempt to stabilise this river in this area. And that was uncovered in the last 5 years since I first spoke to the farmer. So continual erosion was occurring, but it's not for the first time. At this point, this was the most severe point that we addressed. The river spilled at this point. It was a pinch point, and this island that was building forced the river out onto the land. And in fact, the driving force for the farmer to get in touch with me originally was he just lost 17 sheep drowned against the fence within that field due to the river spilling out. Now, it was never our intention to stop the river spilling, but we have helped in some ways here. We understand we need the floodplain to act. You can see there upstream the disconnected meanders, and you can also see that the river is starting to re-meander again. That was straight through there, and it's shown in the previous map images. But the disconnected meanders way back pre-1860. Currently, this is producing a heck of a lot of gravel and sediments that's moving downstream, and that can probably account for some of the erosion that we're seeing further downstream in the worked area. But the right-hand image here shows the situation we face. Very high banks, very sheer banks that are all prone to erosion, and there was tons of soil disappearing each year with this. So we are aware you have to consider, is it a hard engineering approach or a green engineering or a low-tech approach that's required? The image on the left shows hard engineering that was performed, and that happened last year, nothing to do with us. We kind of objected to that, but that was felt to be the way forwards on that river. The approach we've taken on this one, and prefer to take, because I believe you can solve some very big problems with green or low-tech approaches. What we prefer to do is more akin to what's on the right-hand image, if at all possible. But SEPA do point out that hard engineering has its places, and we know around bridges and things like that, you probably have to go that route. So what did we do? We took very simple techniques that are probably widely known, and we used the whole range, well, most of the range that we're aware of over this 600 odd metre worked area of the river. Now, we didn't work every area. Like I said, we wanted to leave some areas to recover naturally, but on the most severe areas, we adopted an approach, and we'll compare the different techniques to see how they perform over time. We asked for Christmas trees from the local community. At Christmas time during the holidays, we put up a post on Facebook on a local community page, and we got 60, 70 trees to lift at the start of January, which we were very grateful for. It saved us cutting or finding other material to use for this job. The Christmas trees are all staked in with live willow stakes, and we also used Brash Bundles, which I'll talk about later. But we also used Brash Bundles in behind the Christmas trees there, and then we graded that bank off. The live stakes that hold these Brash Bundles and Christmas trees, they were scavenged from another opportunistic sort of encounter where we saw line clearance going on around a substation, and we just stopped and asked, could we take the willow? And we took 5 or 6 trailer loads of really perfect willow at the right time, just for the asking. So it's a good material to get, and you just need sometimes to stop and ask for it. Low-tech approaches also include, plant hire and machinery. I think you've got to try and make your life easier where possible, and we used this small excavator as something like an 8-ton machine to grade off these banks, and these were the shear banks that were really friable soils and prone to erosion. And then we were undertaking this work at the wrong time of year. We were aware of this, but this was due to the funding being released over winter. It's not ideal for anybody to work in rivers, but on the balance of things, SEPA and Ayrshire Rivers Trust agreed that the benefits outweighed the risks. To protect the work that we did with the machine and reprofiling the banks, we used coir membrane as a temporary measure to protect against spates, and I'm very glad we did.
We have just a couple of minutes left, if that's okay.
Okay. The other benefit of having a machine on site is you can move large woody debris quickly into place, and this is a very quick way to strengthen your river banks, and it's much lower labour requirement. We used the machine to drive stabs and stakes in, and these are willow stakes, about 8 feet long. I mentioned we use brash bundles. We just make brash bundles up. You can find a video if you don't know how to do that and want to know on our YouTube page, Ayrshire Rivers Trust YouTube pages, and you'll see all our images and videos there. We also use them to keep sheep off of eroding banks, where sheep are terrible for just rubbing against this and taking shade and shelter under river banks, and they cause tremendous problems. So not just next to the water, but on the bankings themselves. Obviously, we planted trees. This project was not just about protecting from erosion, it was about improving biodiversity and connectivity. And you can see the nice woodlands way back from the river, but there was no connectivity. So we used the opportunity of this project to improve for many species. And what is essential, and we've failed any time we haven't installed fencing. Livestock will destroy every effort you make. So we use the funded opportunities like this to get new fences in, new buffers, and get the plantings in. And you can see this is a job elsewhere that we've done very quickly. Using these simple techniques, you can really change the landscape and the way that the river is performing. There's willow spiling. I'm not a great fan of willow spiling. It's very labour intensive, very material demanding, and there's probably easier and simpler ways to build a riverbank, but it does work, and it also has the benefit of producing masses of cuttings and future material for use on a riverbank. It's the willow species. We rely on willow. There's so many varieties there. They're very easy to propagate. They're early flowering species, good for pollinating insects. You can propagate, you can take cuttings and stick them straight in the ground, or you can put them into soil like we've done in the middle photo. They've overwintered and rooted in these wee biodegradable pots. Or you can lift them off shingle beds in the river, shingle banks in the summer, pot them up, and you've got live materials for the next year. And another tree that's very valuable for biodiversity and for bank stability is Sambucus nigra, which is elder. It's an early flowering very high flowering plant, and then you get these masses of berries, so good for pollinating insects and very good for as wild bird food. And really that is the last shot, and that was the project nearing completion. All we need now is the wildflower grass seed mix to germinate. We haven't actually sown it yet because it's too cold at Muirkirk. But once that's sown and germinated, there'll be wildflowers, grasses, and everything holding these banks together. And over the next 10 years, there's probably 3,000 trees being planted within a mile stretch of river there, and it will change this very barren landscape into something much more valuable for all species. And of course, it will reduce the erosion and the silt and sediment that reduced fish production. So that's our talk, and thank you for your time.